Well, that's a pretty big question for me then. If I would like some help and guidance with that, because my journey has been traveling around the world, taking people and going to many sites. So maybe I would like a little guidance, therefore, in where am I at now?
So the first question I would ask myself is, why am I connected to sites? What's the feeling in me that causes me to have this gravitation, this pull towards sacred or holy places, so-called sacred or holy places on the planet? Because from God's perspective, there is no single place on the planet that's more holy than another, right? From God's perspective. And from our celestial friends' perspective, there is no single place on the planet that's more holy than another, because they see the significance in each place. And even that applies even to the Middle East. Like I'm often asked about, in terms of my life, like whether I find the Middle East a significant place for my life. Well, aside from the fact that I grew up there in the first century, there is no other significance to me. It's just another place on earth that things happened, just like there are many other millions of places on earth where things happened. And some of those things involved quite large universal issues at the time of my living in the first century. But just now, there's quite large universal issues being resolved in a lot of different locations on the planet. And yet none of us view those particular places as holy or sacred. And that's the case with all of our celestial friends as well. So whatever draws us to these sites has to be something quite different than our celestial friends. So the key is to look at what it is. Right? It begins with an emotion inside of ourselves. What do we feel when we're there? Now, understand that what you feel when you're at a certain location is heavily influenced by the spirits that are at the location, and you feel a connection with them. So what would cause you to feel a connection with certain spirits who are nostalgic, for example? There has to be a feeling within you that's nostalgic, that's looking for something in the past, if you like. So the key is to look through your life and discover the emotion that's present that causes this nostalgia feeling to be satisfied when you go to a certain location. Does that make sense? Yeah. So can you feel the nostalgia feeling inside of you that you feel gets resolved every time you go to a site that's sacred? Or can you feel a feeling that other people have that you like to see them have when they go to a certain site? Can you see there's two different emotions there? If you take other people to the same location, often it's about the feeling you get seeing the other person go through a feeling, or feeling the other person go through a feeling of their own. Can you feel what that feeling is inside of yourself? You can turn the mic around too.
I'm not feeling. Obviously, I'm in resistance. I'm not feeling it
There's
completely
a strong
right now
about it, yeah.
because it's been such a huge part of my life, from taking groups without even planning to go to those places.
When did it begin? When did the desire to do this begin?
To travel, grandmother, off travel, University of Life.
Your grandmother said.
Yeah, I'm some reason maybe it's just because you're here. I keep being aware of Uluru, so like, interesting. It was she did. She said, go off and travel. It's the University of Life instead of going to university. Yeah.
So
that was emotionally, that was like, not good enough to do this, I'll do this.
Right. So there's a huge emotion involved in not having grandma's approval.
No, the opposite.
Or having
grandmother's approval to go.
If you go off in the University of Life.
Yes. Yeah. That was the first sort of going to travel, and I didn't think of it as sites at the time. It just sort of came as a part of it. Yeah. Going to many places, and it has definitely been an influence on me.
Yeah, so like what I feel from you guys is what they're trying to say, what they've been trying to do is they've been trying to lead you away from this, what they feel is an addiction. and into finding out the truth by using your addiction to discover things that eventually bring you to more truth. Does that make sense? And often they do this.
Well,
because,
that's what's happening.
Because that's all they've got to work with, right?
Yeah.
So what they do is so the addiction to go to travel, which was driven by the approval of grandma, it draws you into travel, and then they utilise that desire for travel in an attempt to address the emotion, or eventually get to address the emotion inside of yourself that leads you to truth, and in the process reduces the original addiction in the end. And this is what our spirit friends often try to do to us in an attempt to help us with discovering more truth, but also in an attempt to release us from the spirit influence we're under while we're in our addiction. And I feel you've been in quite heavy spirit influence at times because you are willing to completely abdicate your own will in this process. And when you're willing to completely abdicate your own will, give it away, then you leave yourself completely open to being influenced by much darker influences. The brighter spirits will not influence you when you abdicate your own will. The brighter spirits do not then take control of your life because they want you to have your own will. One of the whole reasons why you're here on the planet is to embrace your own will, to learn how to embrace your free will. So every time you abdicate your will, and I see a lot of people who are in New Age sort of circles abdicating their own will very frequently, giving themselves away. Almost.
Becoming fascinated with this idea of a guide and guidance and signs, and then before they know it, their life is just totally run by those things instead of first connecting with desire and letting that lead and then being guided.
Because remember, your desires, if they're harmonious with love, they are very different than if they are harmonious with addiction. Right? So whenever we follow a desire that ends up being an addiction, we will often abdicate our own control of ourselves even, and we will allow other influences to come and push us in certain directions that if we had our own will, we would never agree to. Yep. We know of a man in Australia who, when I first met him, he would abdicate his own will every single morning. He'd get up and he'd say to what he called the universe, "What do you want me to do today?" And whatever messages he got, he did that day.
Oh, that's me. I'm let my will be aligned with that. I can definitely put my hand up to that.
And what that does is open you completely to more malevolent spirits guiding your will, because a divine love guide or a guide who's in a condition of love, any guide who's in a condition of love, will not want you to abdicate your own will. They want you to learn how to use your will
in harmony
with love.
It's interesting because it's a sort of more for me almost like I've got a boat with a sail and I'm wanting to get aligned with that, aligned with the wind, but I'm in control of the sails. It's interesting to stir that up. Good.
When you are fully embracing your free will, you are not very open at all to spirits telling you what to do or abdicating your will to spirits. You will be guided when you're guided by your guides or your guardians, what happens is that they give you, all of their messages they give you are completely harmonious with your passions and desires. They don't want you to abdicate your passions and desires and do what they want, because to do that would mean that you're only becoming a puppet of another person rather than knowing yourself. And this is the problem we see in most New Age spirituality. There is this desire to abdicate the will, give it up.
Even in favour of God's will.
Yeah.
When the truth is God's will is that you have your will.
Have your will.
That's
why
his
he
greatest
gave you
desire. Yeah. So God will never tell you what to do. God will say, what is your desire? Is it loving? Go for it, you know.
And if it's not loving, I'll correct it.
Yeah. I'll let you know.
Laws, I'll correct it.
Yeah.
So one of the things to look at quite strongly for yourself in your life is to begin to get back this desire to understand your own desires. What do you want to do? Rather than sort of being blown about here and there, by the forces of nature, let's call it, but it's really spirit forces. Rather than being blown about, allow yourself to connect with what do you desire to do? What are your real passions and desires? Because I actually feel Alicia's really not yet fully discovered them, right? Because you've abdicated your will for such a long time. It's been very difficult for you to know.
I've had conversations this week about that, so perfect. Sorry,
Awesome.
I feel like I've hogged the
time
a little.
Yeah. So do you understand the issue? So do not. I think it's good for us to see what's going on here because whenever we have a tendency to talk about guides and guardians, there is this tendency that people have that they think they know what we're speaking about, and that they think that it's happened in their life, when in reality they haven't been guided by their guide or guardian. They've actually been guided by very negative influences who want them to abdicate their will. And that is not the same as what your guides and guardians are attempting to do with you. Your guide and guardian do not want you to abdicate your will. They want you to embrace your will. And when you embrace your will with passion, they will be able to help you have that will satisfied if it's harmonious with love. And if it's not harmonious with love, they will help you through the same process see, it's not harmonious with love here, and I can address that.
And it's always going to be something that's building on itself. So you're always going to be growing in knowledge that complements the previous knowledge you had, and you're growing towards more and more truth. It won't be like, I landed here, that must be because I should have had some experience. I don't really understand it. I'll go to the next place. I just had another experience. And I know a lot of New Age is sort of typified by that thing of we can't understand and it's just good, and it must have been for some soul purpose that we, a lot of language that doesn't really resolve any meaning in our life. Whereas
your guides want to have resolution of every issue.
Yeah.
They want you to know why you went to a certain place.
They want you to think, and that's taught me this about this, and or God, or the way I am, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Your guides are not mysterious. They are very down-to-earth, practical people. They want to show you exactly what's going on every single time. It's the spirits who are in darkness or darker places who love mystery. They want you to abdicate your will and to give it up to mystery. And God is totally desirous of you knowing all truth. Darker spirits want you to know no truth. They want you to just abdicate your will to mystery so that they can then manipulate you in any direction they want you to go. That's their underlying purpose. So every time we abdicate ourselves, abdicate our desires and our will, we are giving ourselves over, unfortunately. Now, our guides will still try to work with that, which your guides have done. But who knows that if you didn't abdicate your will right at the beginning with your grandma, and you might have gone down a different track, which meant discovery of truth sooner. Does that make sense? Yeah. You don't really know, because once you abdicate your will, then you're really under where the wind blows you.
Even though you feel like you're following your own will, and you feel like it's building, because that makes sense to me as well. I can see that building, yes, go there, and that builds on that, and that builds on that. Even though you can see all of that, and that's the truth, except there's also influences at the same time.
There's also the negative influence at the same time. So your guides are working on you with regard to the truthful influences to bring you to a place, which they have done quite well, considering all the negative influences that have been there, plus your own abdication of your will. Does that make sense? Yeah. And this is where we have to appreciate our guides, because it just demonstrates that even if we take a direction that's quite like giving up will and all sorts of other things, in the end they pull us around to finish up seeing truth anyway. And this is the beauty of our guides, and we have to have a lot of appreciation for their effort, because without their effort, none of those things would have probably occurred. Yeah.